إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أما بعد. The 11th major sin which we're going to speak about inshallah Azza wa Jal is sodomy or homosexuality. And unfortunately this is one of the sins that not only is it a sin by the Sharia, it's also a sin by intellect. It's a sin by logic, it's a sin by fitrah. And if you look throughout history, all of the nations, if they committed a sin, it was a sin which was understandable. One sin, one group of people, they cheat other people in order so they can get some financial benefit. Another group of people oppress their weak and only give the power and the authority and the fruits of society to the strong. Another group of people, their punishment is because of immense drinking of alcohol and committing of zina, etc. When it comes to this sin, only one group of people were destroyed from it. And that was the people of Lut, alayhi salam. And no one throughout history who was punished like the people of Lut. The people of Lut were the only ones whom Allah Azza wa Jal destroyed because of the abomination that they used to commit, not like anyone else. To the extent where Allah Azza wa Jal has preserved their place today. When we see the Dead Sea, this is the place where Qawm Lut alayhi salam were, and this is the place where Jibreel alayhi salam had placed his wing, or one of his wings, the point of his wing, and flipped up the entire city as a sign to remain until Allah Azza wa Jal wishes that nothing will ever be able to live there. It is not suitable for drinking, it's not suitable for life, it's not suitable for anything. And people go there and they take it as a tourist attraction, unfortunately. But this is an ayah from Allah Azza wa Jal that still remains from the punishment that was given to the people of Lut. You see the people of Quraysh, when they were destroyed, you don't see how. When Abraham was destroyed, you don't see how. When the people of Ibrahim alayhi salam were destroyed, you don't see how. But when it comes to the people of Lut, their sign remains until today. And this is a sign for us and for all those who have some intellect and some understanding. One of the ulama, may Allah Azza wa Jal hasten his release from prison, he says only twice in the world's history has the fitrah, the natural inclination, the natural feelings a person's born with, the natural disposition, what's right, what's wrong, what's clean, what's dirty, etc. Only 2 times has this fitrah been switched. One time of Qawm Lut, and now unfortunately today. Where throughout history, before Lut and after Lut alayhi salam, the act was unacceptable. Only towards his people, they accepted it and they encouraged it. And if you fast forward all the way until today, then we fall under the same problem. Where it's encouraged and promoted and accepted. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us and save the Muslim from such disgrace and such humiliation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many times spoke in the Quran about the people of Lut. And spoke with the harshest of words about the abomination that they used to commit. And spoke about their specific punishment. So they had the rock sent to them. This is a punishment in and of itself and can destroy a people. And then also we're told that they were lifted up to the heavens and they were destroyed. And all of this automatically a person understands that the act is haram and was the reason for their punishment. Some people now, Muslim progressives, these people that try and say that homosexuality is halal and the reason Qawm Lut were destroyed, this is kufr automatically. Because this is ijma' al-Muslimin, when a person goes against the consensus of all of the Muslims, like they say alcohol is halal or pig is halal to eat, this is kufr. Because everyone agrees and the texts are extremely clear. And Allah Azza wa Jal clearly stated, أَتَأْتُونَ الذُّكْرَانِ, do you come to the men, min al-alamin, from amongst the creation, وَتَذَرُونَ مَا خَلَقَ لَكُمْ, and you leave what Allah Azza wa Jal created for you, min azwajikum, from your wives. So it's not about shahwa, it's not about your desire or committing zina. It's about you went to men and you committed the haram with men rather than women. And this is a very important point, that not every haram is the same. There is haram worse than other haram. Homosexuality is worse, because at least if a person commits zina, he's committing a natural act between a man and a woman. As for a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, then this is an unnatural act. And things which are not natural have far worse of a sin than that which would be considered by human standards as to be natural. And because of their specified punishment, one of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, أَخْوَفُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَمَلُ قَوْمِ لُوطٍ. From the greatest things I fear of you, or fear upon you, is the actions of the people of Lut. Why? Because of no one had a punishment throughout history like them. And no one committed the filth like them. And if a group of people make it acceptable for them to lower themselves to such an action, what are they going to leave after that? And if you look from a sociological perspective, how societies are run, the science of societies, if you get to a level where you accept homosexuality, what is there not to accept? Why is it wrong if a man can come to a man, then a man can't go to an animal? And you see the spread of this in societies, where bestiality, human beings committing fornication with animals, is on the rise. And in some countries legal. You see the increase in pedophilia, where men or even women will go to young children because there's no barrier anymore. Why can't I be attracted to that young boy or to that young girl? The homosexual says, this is my natural inclination, I was born like this. The pedophile says, I was born like this. I like young children. What is there to stop a person, whatever billah, committing zina with his maharim, committing incest? Mother and father, mother and son, brother and sister. And unfortunately, this is also on the rise. And before, it was always hidden. Never would be acceptable for a person to say, I sleep with my sister, whatever billah, or I sleep with my mother. No one would ever accept such a statement. And this person would be incriminated. But even though it's a crime today, society has become soft towards it. Why? Because what's the justification for homosexuality? One, it's a natural love between those two men. Two, they're both adults, they can make their own decision. Correct? So when it comes to our brother and sister, waliyadu billah, what's their justification? We're both adults, we can make our own decision. If I want to be with her, what's anyone's business? So their values are gone. Why? Because they accepted homosexuality. Before the acceptance of homosexuality, a person was not allowed to even show signs that he was homosexual. He wasn't even allowed to have feminine tendencies. It was known even when I was a little bit younger, that if a person, a non-Muslim, was to wear an earring in the right ear, then this was a sign that he was a homosexual, and this person would be beaten. Not by Muslims, by non-Muslims. And what's one of the promises of Iblis to Allah? That he will work to what? Change the nature of human beings. That they will change the way they were created. The original tafsir of this ayah was something as simple as shaving the beard. Because it's not natural for a man to shave his beard. This is changing the creation of Allah. And now you look at what you're interested in. You've gone from being interested into a woman to promoting being interested in a man. And not only is it promoted and encouraged, but it's protected. That in the name of saving a person from discrimination, they are given preference. I used to work in a corporate environment. Almost every single one of my managers, from my direct manager and all the way up, was a homosexual. Why? Because they were given preference in order to show diversity. So look how the table has flipped. Where we went from, in order to not discriminate against these people, we started to discriminate against straight people. A person's a heterosexual, a natural way of living, man and woman, and this person we discriminate against, and we prefer the person who commits something unnatural. Why? Because this is where a person's intellect will eventually lead him to the mazbala. It will lead you to the rubbish dump. This is why in Sharia we have al-naql. Al-naql is the Quran and the Sunnah, what's been given to us. Fawq al-aql, on top of our aql, our intellect. Because when they originally started secularism, hundreds of years ago, do you think this is where they wanted it to end up? Even those 100 years ago, they wouldn't accept it. As societies, liberal societies, progressed and developed and evolved, even 50 years ago, do you think this is where they wanted to end up? Of course not. But this is the sickness of the mind, where you place false pretexts, you place values and morals and systems and guidelines and rules and foundations and principles that will eventually lead you to the worst of places. This is all in the name of equality. But look where equality went from before to where it ends up now. And Allahu Alam where we'll end up later in the future. And this is why, dear brothers, it's important to learn your religion. To learn your religion so that you can answer. If someone talks to you about these matters, you know how to reply. If your children are asked, you know how to raise your children properly. Because now not only is it encouraged as a value in society that it's accepted, it's also promoted now to your children. Before it used to be in the workplace, in your induction, and we don't discriminate against people. Now to the children in preschool and in kindergarten, they want to speak about these topics. That, oh young boys, it's acceptable for a man to like a man and a woman to like a woman. And if you preach other than that, you are an extremist and a fundamentalist and you are not welcome. Why are half the mashayikh from overseas are not allowed back here? Why when they apply for visas to come to Australia to give talks, 3/4 of them are not allowed back in Australia? Because they spoke about homosexuality. Where's the freedom of speech? If they have an opinion that it's acceptable, my freedom of speech dictates that I'm allowed to say it's not acceptable. And so it's important to understand that their rules are their rules, and our rules are our rules. We have our way of life, and we are not allowed to drop our way of life to accept any other way of life when it comes to our religion. The normal things, playing sport, we have no issue. Normal values that we both share, being honest, being upright, having good character, helping those in need, we both share these values. There is no issue with that. And Islam has no issue with that. A person drives properly, drives safely, doesn't dump, no one has a problem with that. But when we're forced to accept that homosexuality is okay, Islamically you are not allowed to accept this. And they have no problem with you, as we were talking about in the khutbah. They have no problem with you praying and coming to the masjid and fasting Ramadan and helping the poor and needy. They have no issue, as long as you accept their values. And the Sharia says you can commit every sin under the sun, but you cannot believe someone else's values are better than our values, because that will lead you outside of the fold of Islam. If a person believes homosexuality is okay, waliyadu billah, this takes a person outside of the fold of Islam. And as we mentioned, that this is a step, and it's a big step. Once it's accepted, every other sin becomes accepted, and there's no problem for it whatsoever. Wallahi, how societies become open in committing such an act is disgusting. And even a non-Muslim that has a little bit of values knows that this is wrong. Knows that this is wrong. And unfortunately, there's a big push in the Muslim community to accept this, and this is why they bring out some gay du'at, waliyadu billah. The one that they brought out in America, and the one that they brought out here in Melbourne. Alhamdulillah, they quieted down now because they realized the Muslims didn't accept it. Even the Muslim that has no idea about his religion, alhamdulillah, he completely rejected the notion that there can be something called a gay imam. This is unacceptable. That there can be someone saying homosexuality is halal. If zina isn't halal, how can homosexuality be halal? That's natural, at least between a man and a woman. How can something unnatural be accepted? But still with that, we say and we remind that this act is a major sin, and if a person believes it's halal, then unfortunately that person has left the fold of Islam. Now there's many weak ahadith to showing how bad homosexuality is, but we only want to go with that which is authentic and hasan and okay to take. But again, the fitrah is rejecting of such an act. Regarding a person doing the same act but with their wife. So the way subhanallah, I'm trying to use the best of words for the children. The way a man would enter another male is from the behind. Okay, and in Islam, this is also a major sin. And that's why the author, rahimahullah, has placed a chapter underneath this door in order for us to understand. A man is not allowed to go to his wife except with what Allah Azza wa Jal has made permissible. And that's her entire being, and the entire woman is halal except from that particular spot from behind. And the Prophet ﷺ said that person is cursed. ملعون من أتى حائضا أو امرأة في دبرها. Cursed is the one who comes to his wife and she's in her menses, and cursed is the one who comes to his wife from behind. So this is not allowed. And unfortunately as well, this naturally is not correct. Naturally, it's not a place a person can go to. But what's happened with the unfortunate spread of pornography and the addiction to pornography, it's caused so many of our youth that the natural progress of pornography is that it gets worse and worse. So it will go from a normal film to something which is worse and something which is more extreme. And unfortunately, also part of that is what we're speaking about now. And so a lot of young men have taken an attraction to this. And so unfortunately there's stories that some wives are forced to do this. Waliyadu billah. And this is a major sin and it is not allowed. As for the misconception that a person who does this automatically divorces his wife, then this is incorrect. If a person does this act, it's a major sin, but it doesn't automatically constitute divorce between him and his wife. But every man should know that it's not allowed, and any woman, waliyadu billah, who's forced into doing this should seek advice straight away, because if that is continuous and the husband is not to stop, then the woman should not be married to that man and should leave that man. But this is done obviously through a sheikh and through proper counseling. But again, these acts are major sins. These acts are major sins and they're known. And never should a person be accepting of it. Never should a person belittle it. Whatever Allah Azza wa Jal hates, you should also hate. And this is the pinnacle of Islam. The pinnacle of your iman is that you love what Allah loves and you hate what Allah hates. And so this is why, alhamdulillah, recently, and we didn't hear much about it this year, recently when there's the Mardi Gras, if Muslims are supporting of such an act, then this is from the most disgusting of things, even if you believe it's haram. And you should not assist such acts in any way, shape or form. If a person drives a taxi, don't work on that night, especially in that area. Because you know most of your work is going to be what? Picking up people and dropping them off. If you make sweets and chocolate and cakes and cupcakes, don't sell to such people. Yeah, if they want for that celebration. Because you shouldn't assist them in any way, shape or form. Even with the most basic of things, which people belittle today. That's on top of having a specific float saying Muslims supporting so-and-so. Or Muslims going and attending. Or Muslims watching on TV. You would love to say that these words are fantasies and no one does this. But unfortunately it's pushed, especially to our young teens and our Muslim kids in universities, where these values and morals are pushed. Also I remind, even for the adults, because most of the time in the workplace you're going to come across these people. It is not allowed to say that if that's what you want to do, that's fine. You need to be very particular with your words. And you need to make it known that it is not allowed. So it's not allowed for a person to say, you do what you want to do, and that's fine. That's your choice. A person needs to add the words at least at the end. You choose what you want to choose in this world. But you will have to deal with the consequences. Because at least then the person knows that you know it's a sin and you disagree with it. And you shouldn't say, I have no problem with it. This is not allowed in Islam. In Islam, our da'wah needs to be clear. You can say, look, in Australia, the law says you can do what you want. But in my religion, we don't agree with this. And we believe it's a major sin and a horrible act. And you choose what you choose in this world. Allah has allowed you to make your own choices. Allah hasn't forced you to do anything. But He set guidelines, and you will be asked about what you commit. And you will have to deal with the consequences. So you need to be very clear that this act is not an act that we agree with, nor would we allow. But obviously that doesn't mean that we do with people in disrespect and we put them down and we swear at them, etc. Especially in a country where you don't have the authority, and most of the time, as we said, they're protected. So even if they feel offended today, whatever billah, a person can be fired. If it ever got to the stage where there was a plebiscite or there was a referendum and we're asked to vote, the Australians are asked to vote, should we allow same-sex marriage or not? It is a duty upon us to vote no. It's not enough to say we stay at home and let the people do what they want. Every single person who is eligible to vote needs to go and vote no. And this is part of inkar al-munkar fima tastati'. This is part of forbidding the evil and what you're able to do. Even though we don't agree with everything else the government does, but if we're given the choice to stop an evil, then we do what we can, and we go and we say we disagree. But teach this to your children, because they're the ones now most targeted, especially at schools. The next major sin, the 12th major sin, riba, interest. And Sadaqa Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he said that a time will come where every one of my ummah will be affected by even the dust of riba. Yani, even today, no matter how much you try to get away from riba, somewhere, somehow there's something to do with riba. But that doesn't mean that we justify doing more than what we should, or more than what we have to do, or more than what we're forced to do. Very important, dear brothers and sisters, that we understand what transactions we're getting ourselves into. There's the normal common transactions that we all know. A house loan, if it's a mortgage, this is not allowed. It has to do with interest, usury, riba. When it comes to car loans, getting your car on finance, this is not allowed. But also many things which a Muslim thinks it's normal is not, and it's not halal. For example, interest-free loans. When Harvey Norman does 50 months interest-free, what do you say Muslims do? Alhamdulillah, yes. I'll go and I won't pay interest, and I'll pay it back before I get charged interest. This is not allowed. Because the Prophet ﷺ cursed who when it comes to interest? The one who gives interest, the one who charges interest, the one who writes the contract for interest, and the one who's a witness for interest. So when you are agreeing, if I was to go over this loan, then you charge me interest, that is haram in and of itself. And on top of that, not only do you pay back that amount, but if you read the terms and conditions, what do you need to do if you open up an interest-free loan or interest-free account with Harvey Norman or any other company that offers the same service? What do you need to do? Don't you need to open up an account originally? Anyone know? Tayyib, I'll tell you. You need to open up an account with them, and you need to pay money to open up the account. And then monthly, in order to keep that account running, you need to pay, maybe even if it's $5 or $6. So Islamically, you took from them, from commodities, let's say you took $3,000 worth, to be paid back in 3 years' time. But do you pay back only $3,000? No. You pay back from what you originally opened up to the time you finished your account, maybe at least an extra $500. So you end up paying back $3,500. That's riba, even if you didn't pay anything more for the actual goods that you took. And even if that wasn't there, the simple fact that you agreed that if you go over the time, then you will pay riba, this is not allowed. It's like you told me now, here's $1,000, you have 1 month to pay me back. But if you take more than 1 month, every week I'm going to charge you $50. Is that allowed? No, it's not allowed. And so it becomes riba. So these loans are not halal. Also, many of the hire purchase that people do when it comes to their cars. Even though not all of it fall under riba, but it falls under many things in the buying and selling which are not allowed. You can't buy and rent something at the same time. You need to, you're either buying it, so you own it, even if you're still paying it off, or you're renting, where they own it. And at the end of your period, you simply give back the car. But many of the hire purchase today, at the end of the contract, you either have to pay the balloon, or you have to take out another car. Okay, and usually there's interest on top, and accumulated interest, etc. So you need to watch out everything that you do. Many people that open up bank accounts, and they earn interest on it. Many people with their superannuation, they've got their superannuation stored away with a company, usually a bank, and they earn interest on that money, that superannuation. This is not allowed. Okay, you need to go put your money in a halal super fund. Many people, when it comes to La ilaha illallah, credit cards, same thing. They go and they get credit cards and they say, I know I'm going to pay you back within its time. The simple fact that you agreed means you are now signing off on riba, so you fall into a major sin. And what guarantees you that you're going to be able to pay it back in general? Okay, so many forms of riba a person falls into. So a person needs to make sure that all of his money is halal to the best of his ability, and everything that he buys or sells or signs a contract on, that is halal. Even shares, when you buy shares, you need to make sure these companies are based on riba. Like for example, taking shares in a bank, etc. Because its main work is riba. So you need to watch out for such issues. A big misconception when it comes to riba is when people rent. What do they say? Well, I'll go buy my own house, because when I'm paying rent, what am I doing? I'm paying off someone else's loan. So I'm still like I'm paying riba. Incorrect. Islamically in Sharia, your job is the transaction between A and B is halal. So when you pay rent, are you doing anything haram? No. What happens when B and C is not your problem? In Islam, the requirement is your transaction between A and B is halal. As for B and C, then this is not your Islamic requirement to make sure it's halal. You paid $500 rent, that's halal. If that person goes and pays a mortgage with it, that's not your problem. That's not your problem Islamically. Okay? Many people make this excuse, it's like you're paying riba anyway. And that is completely incorrect. If you are paying money in order for you to be out of riba, then you get hasanat. And that $500 that you give is considered a sadaqah. Because you're paying rent, doesn't matter how much it is, in order to stay away from the haram. If your intention is to stay away from the haram, then every cent that you give in that rent is considered an act of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jal says in one of the main surah in the Quran about riba, and it's one page in Surah Al-Baqarah, where at the beginning, الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَا لَا يَقُومُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَقُومُ الَّذِي يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ مِنَ الْمَسِّ. The people who eat riba, and eating is eating and taking and giving. Not only the one that gives, as some misunderstand, the one who gives and the one who takes. So the ones who take riba, Allah Azza wa Jal says, on the day of judgment, they will only stand up like the one who has been beaten by the shaitan. And some of the Mufassirin said, he will get up as if he's sick, like a majnoon. He's someone who's mentally sick. You know, in this world, when you see someone that's mentally sick, what do you say? They say, Alhamdulillah, alladhi afana. All praise, all thanks is due to the one who protected us from being in such a state. You know, we see someone walking in the street and he's screaming and talking to himself. He lost his family, he lost his children because he went mentally ill. When you see people in mental institutions, don't you say, Alhamdulillah, I'm not in that place? Imagine being on the day of judgment, being from these people. In this world, at least they're not accountable in this world. At least they don't even know that they're majaneen. They don't know that they're mentally ill. Imagine on the day of judgment, a person waking up on the day where he realizes there is nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide, there's no appeal process. There's nothing to change, there's Jannah and Jahannam. On that day, that's when he realizes, I'm from the majaneen. I'm from the losers. I'm from those who are mentally sick. I'm from those who are not correct. Wallah, that's the worst realization. And the ones who do with riba, this will be their end. that they will be on the day of judgment like these. Why? ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا. Because they said the riba, interest, is like trade. Huh? You go, you agree to the contract, you go buy the house and you pay them more. There's no issue. They belittled it. And al-bay', some of the mufassirin said, al-bay', buying and selling, is a halal or haram? It's halal. So they said a riba is also halal. And this is not allowed. And this is completely wrong. And even the ones who say a house is allowed by mortgage on your first house, this is also not allowed. And this is haram. Even if you ask most people, who gave this fatwa? Give me the name of the sheikh that gave this fatwa. They can't tell you. طيب, what are its conditions? If you say haram is halal, it can become. Sometimes haram can become halal. But always it has conditions attached to it. What are the conditions of a house being halal? First condition, you must be in need. You can't find houses to rent. You can't find houses to lease. You can't get a housing commission. If you don't get a house, you're going to end up on the street. Then, okay, you can take riba. But then what house can you buy in riba? Can you buy a 5-bedroom house in Greenacre worth $1 million now? No. You have to buy the bare minimum which fulfills your needs. To buy, for example, $450,000 out in Campbelltown, same house, and you can live in it, alhamdulillah, 3 bedrooms, bathroom, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But what do the people do? They buy the best of the houses in the best of areas. And then they buy a second and third and fourth house. Why? Because their intention is not they're doing it because they want to seek the pleasure of Allah. They're not doing it because they're in need. They're doing it to fulfill their desires. I know of a person, wallahi, who had the money cash to buy a house. Had money cash to buy a house. He could have bought one in Liverpool, Campbelltown, no issue. But he didn't want a normal house. He wanted, mashallah, a western suburbs mansion. So he went and borrowed more so he can buy a house. And he borrowed more than what he had. So he could have bought 2 houses if he had bought with the original price. So it's not about, wallah, I fear Allah, that's why I don't want to do riba. It's I want to fulfill my desires and get whatever I can, even if that means in the haram, with any Islamic justification. So no, dear brothers, there's no excuse to take riba unless one is in extreme need. And alhamdulillah, I don't think I've come across anyone with this issue. Unless someone's got maybe a lot of children and no one will rent out his house and he can't live with his parents because of how much children he has, mashallah, then if he speaks to a sheikh, he might get a specific fatwa. He might get. And this usually if there's no Islamic alternative. And alhamdulillah, there's Islamic alternatives today. They're expensive, yes. But a lot of the mashaykh have said it's halal. So even if the halal is expensive, go for it. Then there's no issue with this. Even if the halal is expensive, you prefer it over going to haram. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا ظَهَرَ الزِّنَا وَالرِّبَا فِي قَرْيَةٍ أَذِنَ اللَّهُ بِهَلَاكِهَا. If 2 things become prominent in society, Allah Azza wa Jal allows for its destruction. One of them is what? Zina. The other one is riba. Whatever billah, we see this extremely prevalent in societies today. Where zina and promiscuity and nakedness and brothels and homosexuality and pre or extramarital affairs are widespread and promoted and protected. And then zina. One of the first letters I got when I turned 18 was from Commonwealth Bank. Happy birthday, if you want you can get a credit card. I don't even have a job at that time. I'm still in high school. Happy birthday, if you want you can get a credit card. Still now, you need to open up a bank account in order to put money somewhere because you can't keep cash and you need to get paid. What every few weeks, we've got a new offer. What's this new offer? Instead of paying 20% interest on your credit card, you can pay 17% interest on your credit card. Every few weeks. You still get letters and you call up, I forgot my PIN code, can you give me my PIN code? Oh, Mr. Nasim, would you like a credit card? So easy. I know people, they just turned 18, the bank gave them $20,000 on a credit card. They just turned 18 and they gave them. How? The global financial crisis where the world's economies dropped. Due to what? Due to interest, because you're not paying back your loan. You're just paying back the interest that you're getting charged. Because it's an unfair system. And this is why Allah's made it such a great sin. If a person tries to figure it out intellectually, what's so wrong if I, as a grown man, agree, if you give me 10,000, I'll give you 11,000 back. What's so wrong about that? But when you look at the effect that it has on people and societies, it destroys. People have to work, subhanAllah, like animals, in order for them to pay back their mortgage for over 20 or 30 years now. They have to work day and night in order to make their repayments. And they're stressed and they're never happy. And then once they pay it off, they end up dying anyway. And the house prices raise that much that even if they were to sell their house, and the children inherit the money, still it doesn't even make a deposit for a house anymore. So you see the dhulm, you see the oppression it has. And the system is designed to make the banks extremely wealthy and to keep the poor people extremely poor. And this is one way societies are controlled, that you keep them poor and in need.
About the opposite end, like what's wrong about banks giving interest?
What is that?
Like when banks give interest.
When the only reason a bank gives interest is for it to get more interest in return. A person, when the bank gives you 5% interest or 6% interest, they're giving you $20, but they're taking off you in your house loan and the loans that you took off them. They're charging you how much, and your credit card they're charging you how much, and their car loans they're charging you how much, and your holidays they're charging you how much, etc. Believe me, the way that these companies are set up is so that they never lose. The Prophet ﷺ also says, إذا ظن الناس بالدينار والدرهم وتبايعوا بالعينة وتتبعوا أذناب البقر وتركوا الجهاد في سبيل الله أنزل الله بلاء فلا يرفعه عنهم حتى يراجعوا دينهم. If the people get too caught up in the dinar and dirham, they get too caught up in money, and they fall in love with the dunya, and they start dealing in al-aina. And this is why it's important to understand the transactions that people do today in order to get around riba. What's al-aina? This bottle, I want to sell it for $1,000. You want a loan of me for $500. And you say, Nasim, please lend me $500 and I'll give it back to you $1,000 in 1 year. I say, okay, what do I have? This is the bottle. Take the bottle for $1,000 and pay me back in 1 year. So I sold you the bottle for how much? 1,000. To give it back to me when? After 1 year. Now it's your bottle. And you owe me $1,000. I told you, let me buy it off you, the bottle back off you for $500, and I'll give you the cash now. So I take 500 and I give it to you, and I take my bottle back. What have I done? Based on the outlook of it, I sold it to you for 1,000, I bought it back for 500. On the outlook, halal or haram? On the outlook, I bought and you bought. Halal or haram? Halal on the outlook. But what is it? It's simply a trick for you to get that $500 right now and to give it back to me as 1,000. Is that halal or haram? That's haram. So this is an old way which people made in order for them to get money, charge interest, okay, and pay interest, but in a way which they try and trick the Sharia. You can't trick Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's why it's important to look at all the contracts that you do and all the contracts that you make, so you don't say, Wallah, no, this is halal. Even if you fought a sheikh, Assalamu alaikum sheikh, this is what I'm going to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, is it halal? Yeah, alright, jazakallah khairan. Sheikh said it's halal. The sheikh's not going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give you that fatwa. You're going to have to deal with that. So don't try and follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what the circumstances may be. If the people get too caught up with money and loving the dunya and loving money and wealth, and they start to do bay' in al-aina, okay, so they start to find haram ways in dealing with riba, or tricky ways in dealing with riba, and they follow the tails of cows, they follow the dunya, okay, they get caught up in dunya, and they leave fighting jihad for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will send upon them a punishment, and it will not be lifted until they go back to their religion. And then people still say, why do you talk about going back to your religion will give you success of the ummah? Because the Prophet ﷺ said so. Also we know, and it will be summarized, we also know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he seen the people being punished in their grave. What was the punishment of those who dealt with riba? That they're swimming in a pool of, it's in the grave. They're swimming in a pool of blood, and every time they try and swim out of that bank and climb out of that bank, there's an angel there and he throws back. He throws a rock so that person ends up back in the middle. So he's swimming in a pool of blood. He tries to get out to the bank and a rock is thrown back at that person. And look, this is the punishment before the Jahannam. This is a punishment in a person's grave. Whatever billah. But no one would swim in a pool of blood today. No one. No one would wear a shirt that has all blood on it. If a person sees an animal being slaughtered in halal and there's blood, he does his best to step out of it. How then would a person want to put himself in a situation where he's swimming in a place full of blood? And what many of the ulama said that when it's thrown in his mouth, why is it thrown in his mouth? Just as he had no problem eating riba in this world, then he should have no problem eating the rocks that are thrown to him in the grave. Another hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam: "الربا 70 حوبا أهونها كوقع الرجل على أمه." والعياذ بالله. The riba, the interest, is 70 types. Interest is 70 types. The least of which is like sleeping with a person's mother. It's like sleeping with your own mother. A'udhu billah. No one would ever think about committing such an act. We spoke about homosexuality being bad. How about this act? So it's important that when we look at such an act of riba, we don't belittle it and say, Wallah, everyone's doing it, it's normal. Prophet ﷺ says the smallest amount from it, the smallest level of it, the least level of it, the entry level of it, is like, wal'adhu billah, a person sleeping with his mother. So never, dear brothers, belittle such a sin, such an abomination of an act. And don't belittle riba because of the people's standards. Always keep your standards, the Quran and the Sunnah. What Allah makes a major sin, you also make a major sin. What Allah Azza wa Jal hates, you also make yourself to hate. Just quickly on Akl Amwal al-Yatim, because this is something that it's not as common today, okay, in the forms that it used to be known in, but at least we understand some of the modern ways that people eat the wealth of the orphans. Taban, the orphans are those with no parents. The orphans are those with no parents, and so they're in need of other people. And again, this is why Sharia puts so much emphasis on the one who looks after these children. Because who's there to look after them? After Allah Azza wa Jal. Those around them, those that support them. And so a person could be entrusted either as a guardian, or it could be a person who looks after an orphanage, or you could be a person collecting money for them, etc. Before, there wasn't like all orphanages where you had 50, 60 children in one place. They were looked after by their relatives. So what would happen is, let's say that little child, 6, 7, 8 years old, his father left behind a lot of wealth. Now that child is meant to inherit that wealth. But who looks after that wealth for him? His guardian. And that's why many of the orphans used to be oppressed, and unfortunately are still oppressed today. When it comes to charities, if you want to open a charity, or you want to work with a charity that looks after orphans, you need to understand that that money that you get is an amana, that you spend it in the in the benefit of the children, and what's in their best interest. Because you will be asked about this, and Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا وَسَيَصْلَوْنَ سَعِيرًا. Those who eat the wealth of the orphans oppressingly, these people only eat in their stomachs the fire. Because this is you eat, this is what you're putting in your stomach. You think that you're benefiting yourself, but really you're burning yourself and setting yourself up for Jahannam, and they will be thrown into the hellfire. Allah says also, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُ. And don't go near the wealth of the yatim. What else is a similar ayah? وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا إيش؟ الزنا. Don't go near zina. So when you think of how careful you should be of not going near zina, you don't look at haram, you don't touch haram, you don't shake hands with haram, you don't talk promiscuously with haram, you don't be alone in a room with haram, etc. In order so it doesn't lead you to zina. Allah uses the same words when it comes to the wealth of the yatama. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ. Don't go next to the wealth of the yatim. Because a lot of people here get oppressed. As we said, a person with charities. Also people when it comes to inheritance. If a person passes, his parents pass away, and he's got a young brother or a young sister, isn't that person considered a yatim? Yes. He doesn't have mom, he doesn't have father. This person, are they entitled to the inheritance? Of course they are. Just like the older brother and the older sister are entitled, so is the young child. So what happens a lot of the time, unfortunately, only the big children take the inheritance. The father left behind 100,000, you take 20, you take 20, you take 20, and regarding the children's share, don't worry about them. We'll keep it for ourselves, we'll share upon ourselves. This is haram and it needs to be returned to them. And that taking of that wealth is haram and it's a major sin. And this happens unfortunately a lot. Overseas there's different ways that people eat the wealth of the orphans. That's not too much our concern right now. But these two, if you work in a charity, then don't spend, and I've seen brothers like this, they build a 5-star place with the money that's collected for the orphans, but the orphans themselves don't get much money. So they can say, look, we've got a beautiful place, but what about spending for them? Okay, that's one, in terms of charity. Second, if you know people, or it's your situation, where parents pass away and the children are young, they're entitled to the inheritance. And if a person eats that wealth, they fall under these verses, and that they're committing a major sin, and that money is not their money, and they need to return that money. And to show you the good of looking after an orphan, the Prophet ﷺ says, أَنَا وَكَيْفُرُ الْيَتِيمِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ هَكَذَا. And he showed his 2 fingers, السَّبَّابَ وَالْوُسْطَى. The one who looks after the orphans, I and him are in Jannah like this. Okay, so alhamdulillah, most of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us that we can live comfortably and still have excess wealth. We can still have extra wealth. We pay our rent, we pay our food, we have money to put for our children's schooling, we put petrol in our cars, alhamdulillah, we're looked after here. Look after the orphans to the best of your ability overseas. And never belittle sadaqah. It might be $50 a month. If you can give more, there's nothing wrong giving $5, $6, $700 a week in sadaqah if you're able. Don't be the people of dunya who say, I need to save, I need to save, I need to save. Maybe that will happen. Allah loves those who give in wealth. And wealth, as the Prophet ﷺ said, is a burhan. وَالصَّدَقَةُ burhan. Wealth is from the strongest forms of evidence for you. Because you love وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. So when you give it for the sake of Allah, you're showing Allah, oh Allah, the wealth that I have, you're more beloved to me than my wealth. So I take what I have. Give for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, especially looking after the orphans. Wallah, the amount of orphans now, subhanallah, from the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, because this is what there's many other places of course, but we're talking about what I personally know. In Lebanon, there's schools full of orphans. Schools full of orphans. They don't have a father, some don't have a father or a mother. And they're just living and being looked after by someone else. And you do whatever you can to the best of your ability to give. If it's in Africa, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, doesn't matter where. The ummah needs our wealth. Wallahi, masajid need our wealth. Orphanages need our wealth. Refugees need our wealth. Quran schools overseas need our wealth. Mashayikh for da'wah overseas need wealth. Everyone needs wealth. So do use what Allah has given you out of blessings in order for you to have your share in these hasanat. These were today's 3 major sins. Inshallah Azza wa Jal, next week we'll continue with the next group of sins. Anyone have any questions, brothers? You had a hand up before?
Yeah, I just want to know the people working for the
No. Jayid. A Muslim is not allowed to work for the bank. Okay, the Muslim is not allowed to work for the bank because there's some jobs that you work in, especially in a non-Muslim country, where 95% of your work is halal and 5% might be haram. This is not like a person who works in the bank where 95% of your work is haram. The company itself is a haram company where it's set up and based on riba. Like a person who has a pig farm. You can't work at a pig farm because their line of work in buying and selling pig is haram. Okay, so the same thing with the banks. If it's an Islamic bank, this is a different story. But in general, the banks that in Australia, 95% of them are un-Islamic banks, if not higher than that as a percentage, and they're built upon haram and they do with haram, and so it's not allowed to work in. And that person, and it's very important to understand that those people who work in banks, their income becomes haram, and so they're feeding their families in haram and nourishing their bodies in haram. And the Prophet ﷺ said, the body that's nourished in haram deserves the hellfire. A question from the sisters: if parents buy a house in riba and they die, are the children then responsible to pay it off? And are they able to inherit what was bought with riba? Again, this is working backwards. So we said between A and B is not your problem between B and C. This is working backwards. So this is C and B, between the bank and your parents. If the bank and your parents have bought a house in haram, if you were to inherit it, did you do haram to inherit that payment? No. So you're able to take that house. You're able to take the inheritance or the house itself, because you didn't do haram. You inherited in a halal way, which was via your parents' inheritance after they pass away. As for, is it your obligation to pay it off? No, it's not your obligation to pay it off. And this is haram wealth, is not your obligation. But what I say is, you need to be wise and understanding. If a person passed away and they had, for example, $20,000 left to pay off the house, or $100,000, if a person sometimes might fall into more harm if they don't pay it off. So in a situation like that, or in any time a parent pass away, go and speak to a knowledgeable sheikh who's got knowledge in inheritance and knowledge in this field, and explain the situation to him and let him give you a fatwa. If, for example, it's going to be $20,000 you pay off, and that's it, the payments are finished, then that in most cases will be halal in order for you to finish it off and move on. But if you're going to sow, etc., most of the time you're going to pay the exact same amount anyway.